If you watched that clip of Caitlyn Clark walking onto a European court and hearing almost 10,000 fans erupt, you probably did a double take. The crowd was on its feet, chanting her name like she was a rock star. For women's basketball, that kind of reception is almost unheard of. At the same time, on this side of the Atlantic, you've got WNBA arenas suddenly feeling a lot emptier and television ratings taking a hit the moment Indiana Fever and Caitlyn Clark were eliminated from the playoff picture. That contrast is impossible to ignore, and it raises real questions about where women's basketball is headed next in the United States and in Europe. Let's start with the numbers, because that's where the reality really hits. Game 1 of Aces Liberty, the marquee rivalry the league has been trying to build, aired on an NFL Sunday and drew an average of 929,000 viewers. By traditional WNBA standards, that's a solid number. But compared to the week before, when Clark and the Fever were still in the mix, viewership was down almost 50%, half the audience gone in 7 days. It's not just TV. Attendance in some buildings has dipped back down to levels that look more like what we used to see before the Caitlyn Clark effect hit. Games that felt like events when Indiana came to town feel a lot more like regular nights again when she's not involved. That's not a knock on the talent in the league. It's just a reflection of how sharply one player was moving the needle. Now picture the scene in Barcelona. Sellout crowd, fans chanting, "We want Caitlyn," before the ball is even tipped. Her face on billboards, plastered across social media, heavily featured in every promo. Barcelona Basket understood exactly what they were getting when they signed her. They didn't treat her like just another rookie guard. They treated her like what she is in 2025, the most recognizable name in women's basketball. When she hits her first deep three in that jersey, the place explodes. For European fans, especially younger ones, seeing Caitlyn Clark up close is a huge deal. Their media is already calling her a phenomenon, running highlight packages and analysis segments that look more like what we're used to seeing for EuroLeague men's stars. Isn't she supposed to be doing that in the WNBA? That's the question a lot of people are asking. The answer is complicated. The WNBA is still where the best collection of women's basketball talent in the world plays its regular season. But in recent years, overseas leagues, particularly in Spain, Turkey, Russia, before geopolitical issues, and other parts of Europe, have been increasingly aggressive and competitive in what they offer. Higher salaries for some players, packed arenas in certain markets, fan cultures that feel more like soccer, with chants, banners, and a sense of club pride. For a long time, American fans only heard about those leagues when WNBA players went overseas during the winter to supplement their income. But now with someone like Caitlyn Clark taking that stage, those leagues are getting U.S. attention in a way they have never had before. Meanwhile, the WNBA finds itself in an unexpected position. When Clark came into the league, she didn't just boost Indiana Fever, she boosted everybody. Opponents sold out arenas when the Fever visited, road ticket prices spiked, national broadcast featuring Clark routinely outrated other WNBA games. The league office leaned heavily into that surge, selling media partners and sponsors on the idea that this was the beginning of a new era. And for a while, it looked that way. Season tickets reportedly doubled for some franchises after she was drafted. Clark jerseys and Fever gear were selling in quantities more reminiscent of a top-tier NBA star than a WNBA rookie. Local businesses in downtown Indianapolis and in other cities near WNBA arenas reported bigger crowds on game nights when she and the Fever were in town. Restaurants and bars that never had much to do with women's basketball suddenly had lines out the door when Clark was playing down the street. That was the Clark effect. It was real, and it was fast. But then came the tension. The physical tone of games aimed at Clark was obvious to anyone watching. Hard screens, tight defense, extra contact. Some of that is part of competition. Veterans test rookies. Still, a few incidents didn't feel like normal basketball plays. The Kennedy Carter hip check is the one everyone remembers. A moment that went viral, framed by many as a cheap shot on the league's hottest new star. There was also the Olympic snub. Despite her impact and media presence, Clark didn't make the 2024 Team USA roster. Coaches and selection committee members said the decision was purely based on basketball reasons. Experience, chemistry, system fit. A lot of fans weren't buying it. They saw a power move by an established core to keep a newcomer out of the most prestigious stage.
When she walks into a Barcelona arena now and hears a crowd chanting her name, it's hard not to contrast that with how she was treated in some WNBA arenas and on some WNBA broadcasts. One environment is rolling out the red carpet. The other two often felt like it was telling her to know her place. The business side of this matters, because the WNBA isn't operating in a vacuum. There are NBA owners with stakes in WNBA franchises. There are investors who want transparency about where new revenue is coming from and where it's going. There's already been quiet talk that some owners suspect the league and the NBA might not be fully sharing all the data around recent spikes in interest. How much is being driven by Clark? How profits are being allocated? How much more could be reinvested in players' salaries and benefits? On top of that, the WNBA's media rights story is in flux. The league has been pushing for more games on ESPN and ABC, trying to get better time slots and more shoulder programming. But networks make those decisions based on audience. If ratings fall back toward pre-Clark levels when she's not involved, that weakens the league's position at the negotiating table. There's also a bigger cultural layer here. Conversations about the WNBA in the last 2 years have not just been about basketball. They've also been about race, media narratives, and how certain players are pushed to the front while others are not. Analysts on TV and social media commentators have debated whether the promotion around Clark is simply a reflection of her impact or whether the league and partners have leaned too heavily into a white star at the expense of black veterans who have been carrying the league for years. So when some of those same veterans appeared to be sending messages to Clark on the floor instead of fully embracing her, it fueled that perception and made every decision around her, including where she plays, what number she wears, how she's marketed, feel like part of a larger power struggle. Now she's in Europe, at least for this run, and the immediate data looks brutal for the WNBA. Reports are saying viewership is down by as much as half since she left. Official numbers from 1 week to the next, going from Clark featured games to non-Clark games, show big drops. In the NBA world, losing 50% of your audience week to week gets everyone's attention. In a league still building its fan base, it's a flashing red alarm. On the flip side, European leagues are leaning into the moment. They're offering competitive salaries in the context of women's basketball globally. They're building entire marketing campaigns around her. The Nike billboard in Europe honoring her as the all-time NCAA Division I scoring leader with the bold caption, "This was never a lie," underscores how much clout she has earned. European media is treating her like a top men's EuroLeague or soccer signing, not as a secondary attraction. You can see the difference in energy. In Europe, Caitlyn Clark isn't part of a grind to convince people that women's basketball is worth watching. The assumption is already there because they've watched her at Iowa, in the WNBA, and now in their own arenas. For them, seeing her live is the payoff. For some in the WNBA, there's still this underlying tension between those who built the league through years of struggle and those who are arriving now with mass market appeal. Where this matters most is in the long-term health of women's basketball in the United States. If the WNBA cannot find a way to keep players like Clark at home, in its arenas, under its TV contracts, the league risks losing not just short-term revenue, but a generation of casual fans. The hardcore day one supporters of the WNBA will always be there. They love the game regardless of who wears which jersey. But the millions who started watching because of Caitlyn Clark, the kids who saw her highlights on TikTok, the parents who brought their children to see her in person, those people don't have a built-in loyalty to the league itself. They follow the player. When those fans see her in Barcelona or in any other European city, playing in front of passionate crowds, hitting the same deep threes, signing autographs afterward, and smiling in post-game interviews about how much she loves the energy there, they're going to tune into those games. If the WNBA product doesn't match that experience, the league will have a hard time convincing those viewers to stick around when she's not involved. The WNBA's challenge goes beyond one player. It has to show that it can consistently produce and showcase stars that resonate with a broader audience. It has to improve conditions enough that top-tier athletes feel valued and protected. That includes pay, but it also includes basic things like travel, scheduling, and how physical fouls are officiated. If a player of Clark's profile feels she has to look elsewhere for a combination of respect, compensation, and excitement, others will follow. At the same time, international leagues are ramping up. European clubs know that if they can land even a handful of WNBA stars, they can turn their women's teams into marquee attractions. Sponsors love that international angle. TV networks in Europe are willing to pay up for high-profile matchups that feature players American audiences already know. The Clark effect that we saw in the WNBA, doubling season tickets, soaring jersey sales, local businesses booming on game nights, can very easily replicate itself in Barcelona, Istanbul, Valencia, or anywhere else that can secure her signature. Restaurants near the arena are packed. Bars fill up before and after games. Children show up in her jersey. Local tourism boards quietly root for her success because she is literally bringing in people from out of town. So what does all this mean for Caitlyn Clark's career? On the one hand, she has more leverage than any women's basketball player has ever had at this early stage. She knows, and everyone can see, what happens to ratings and attendance when she is in the mix versus when she isn't. Any negotiation she enters, whether with WNBA teams, Euro clubs, national federations, or sponsors, will be shaped by those facts. On the other hand, she is carrying a weight that no one player should have to bear. She's expected to grow the WNBA, validate overseas leagues, boost USA basketball, and be the face of women's hoops globally. Every decision she makes, including where she plays and for how long, gets put under the microscope. If she stays in Europe longer than one season, some will say she abandoned the W. If she comes back right away, others will say she didn't fully maximize her value. What's clear is that women's basketball, both in the United States and internationally, is at an inflection point. Caitlyn Clark is at the center of that turning point. European arenas are proving what the appetite looks like when the product is presented well and the star is properly highlighted. The WNBA is being forced to confront tough questions about its business model, its marketing strategy, and the way it treats its own superstars on and off the court. For fans of the WNBA in the USA, especially those who came in through college hoops and Clark's run at Iowa, this is a moment to watch closely. The decisions the league makes over the next 2 or 3 years on media deals, CBA negotiations, scheduling, and player relations will determine whether what we've seen with the Clark effect turns into sustained growth or a missed opportunity. For now, the visual is simple: an arena in Barcelona filled to the rafters chanting Caitlyn's name, and WNBA gyms across America trying to figure out how to recreate that kind of electricity, with or without her on their floor.